My name is Alyssa Vine. I'm the University Director of Credit for Prior Learning in CUNY's Office of Academic Affairs. Today's session is the first in our series of professional development workshops that we will be offering throughout the year. Thank you so much to the CUNY Innovative Teaching Academy for their partnership in making these learning experiences available to CUNY faculty and others who are interested. I hope that today's session will be useful and interesting and also a good jumping off point for those of you who haven't necessarily learned about credit for prior learning through other experiences. This is hopefully a really good starting point. The goals for today's session are really to help folks across CUNY gain a clearer understanding of CPL, credit for prior learning, CPL as an academic process, learn a little bit about the national context and history of credit for prior learning, and also some of the data that exists around the potential that CPL holds for student success and for equity. We're also going to go over some of the basic components of CUNY's CPL policy, and a lot of this information we'll go through it pretty quickly. I also want to mention, and I will mention this again and make the link available, that our office has also developed a self-paced online course in Blackboard that goes into a lot more detail about some of the policy components and mechanisms for CPL. So more to come on that, but if anything seems like you want to dive in and learn more, that's going to be a great resource for after the fact. I'm going to start today by sharing a video that we hope conveys the really critical role of faculty in credit for prior learning.
New York City is full of hardworking people whose jobs require technical skills and competencies that are deeply relevant to college-level courses.
For many of these people who haven't completed or attended college, the journey to a degree can feel overwhelming, expensive, and uncertain.
But because we know learning happens everywhere, credit for prior learning at the City University of New York gives eligible students the ability to earn academic credits for knowledge and skills gained outside the classroom.
National data shows that students receiving CPL credit are more likely to persist and graduate, with even greater benefits for those from underrepresented backgrounds.
CPL helps students meet academic requirements, boost their confidence, and save time and money on their path to earning a degree.
But CPL relies heavily on the involvement of faculty, who can verify the integrity and rigor of learning experiences.
It is the faculty who must decide how different types of learning, such as on-the-job training, professional certifications, and specialized skills, align with their department's curriculum.
But here's the thing.
Without the leadership and participation of faculty, all of the benefits of access, equity, and opportunity that CPL offers disappear.
Countless potential students possess the knowledge and skills to enrich the college community, and recognizing these abilities can be key in their decision to choose CUNY.
This academic year, begin integrating CPL into your department's strategy for recruiting, welcoming, and supporting the success of students.
Learn more, get involved, and join CUNY in empowering more New Yorkers to achieve their goals.
All right, I think that next up we're just going to take a few minutes to define what we mean by credit for prior learning for the purpose of today's discussion and for the purpose of CUNY's policy. CUNY's policy defines credit for prior learning, which is also known as prior learning assessment, or PLA, and you'll see throughout this presentation there are references to both. But CUNY's policy really relies on the terminology credit for prior learning. CPL is an academic process that offers students the opportunity to earn credit for college-level learning that's acquired outside of the traditional classroom. And the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning, which is a national organization that's really at the center of CPL work, also defines CPL as a set of methods for assessing non-collegiate learning for college credit based on recognition that the outcome of learning is more important than the pathway to it, and that people can learn the same thing in a variety of modes. So to think for a minute about how we assess what is college level learning, let's first just take a minute to define what we mean. When we say assessment, we're talking about the appraisal of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs that students have acquired, most often as a result of learning. And then when we're defining what college level learning is, Kale really puts these four points forward for consideration about learning that moves beyond general knowledge, learning that combines practice and theoretical knowledge, learning that has a complexity of the breadth and depth, and learning that's found in college curriculum. And this example on screen here is just one of a million examples that you could consider where if we're going to think about driving school, what's learned in that setting, or what somebody learns in an accounting role professionally. We can think about those four characteristics and think about how they each do or don't apply when it comes to thinking about something that rises to the level of college level learning. So just that's a point to consider. I'll also mention, I'll definitely pause at various points for questions, but feel free to drop questions or comments into the chat throughout the presentation today as well. Okay, here I've pulled together some definitions of different credit for prior learning mechanisms that are recognized nationally. These are adapted from a report from a national organization of college registrars and admissions officers. You'll see later in the presentation that that CUNY's terminology and the policy varies a little bit from this, but it does cover it's basically covering the same types of mechanisms. So we're talking about standardized examinations, which can include AP and CLEP. We're talking about non-college programs, which can be different kinds of training, certifications, military experience, industry credentials and professional licenses, that type of thing. What they call conversion of institutional non-credit to credit, that could be thought of as continuing ed, for example. And individualized assessment can refer to portfolio assessment, also demonstrations of skills, interviews, other ways of assessing individualized learning. And then there's also faculty developed exams, which may be thought of as challenge exams, departmental exams. It'll be interesting to see as we go through today's session, just if to start to think about these different types of credit for prior learning and what may be relevant or appropriate for different departments and different perspectives in the group here today. So we'll come back to some of this later. I'm going to take a few minutes just to walk through some of the interesting points in the history of credit for prior learning. Although CUNY has only had a policy in place since 2020, it has actually been around in higher education for quite a long time. As you can see from this timeline, dating back as, you can think about it a little bit in the context of when colleges first adopted entrance exams and when there were credit earning opportunities for those entrance exams in some cases. Following World War II was when the American Council on Education began to establish equivalencies for military experiences as people were returning from the war. Put a note here about how Brooklyn College actually back in the 1950s started their own adult degree program that offered some credit for prior learning opportunities. Throughout the late 60s and into the 70s, there was a lot of energy around credit for prior learning. There were many colleges were established specifically targeting the adult learner population. The Council on Adult and Experiential Learning, or CALE, which I had mentioned earlier, was first formed and started really contributing a lot of research and insights about the adult learner population and about the idea of awarding credit for different kinds of learning experiences. Moving into the 80s and 90s, CALE was conducting a lot of national surveys, which really started to bring to light some of the benefits that credit for prior learning could have. And as you can see in the last 15 years or so, there has been a lot of research into in particular, the benefits of equity that CPL can contribute to. In 2011 was when CUNY School of Professional Studies was established as a degree completion program for adult learners, and CUNY SPS, along with several other CUNY colleges, have actually been building credit for prior learning programs over the course of the last 15 years and before. The policy that we're really here to learn about today was first established in 2020, and right around the same time, a really interesting and important report came out from CALE that we're going to get into more detail about the learning that came from that experience. I'm also going to point out that in 2022 was when CALE actually switched their terminology over to CPL after having previously referred to it as PLA. So just some context there. Also going to share, and my colleague Jess is going to drop into the chat these documents, both the timelines we were just looking at, and then also this portrayal of the media coverage from inside higher ed that has appeared since 2010. And we're going to give folks a minute just to open up these documents if you're interested, and click around on some of these headlines and just take a closer look at some of the coverage that has come in recent years and in relatively recent history. I'll also take this opportunity to say if anybody has questions, wants to unmute and contribute any comments or drop questions into the chat while other folks are reading through, please feel free. Okay, we have a question in the chat about, are any of these for graduate credit or just undergraduate? The CUNY's policy was really developed with undergraduate education in mind, but there is nothing that precludes us from awarding credit for considering credit for graduate level work as well. So if, as we're going through today's presentation or in general, that's something that you think may be interesting and relevant for your department or your college, absolutely, we can dive deeper into that and explore that. And we would love to see more opportunities for graduate level students to earn credit for their experience as well. All right, if folks have any thoughts based on just taking a closer look at these headlines or the timeline, feel free to chime in the chat. I'm going to move on here to talk a little bit about the national landscape of credit for prior learning. As you may or may not be aware, there are more than 36 million adults under 65 and over 40 million overall across the United States that have some college but no degree. So this means people who may have started at college at some point in their lives, earned some credits, left for various reasons, personal, professional, wasn't the right time for them, family reasons, et cetera. That accounts for about 18% of the total US population between 18 and 64. We have a question about financial aid and CPL. We can get into that in more detail later. Donna, thank you for raising the question. There are, in addition to this huge population of people with some credit and some college credits and no degree, there's also another quarter of Americans, 25 and older, who have a high school diploma and no further education. So all of those people can be thought of as people who are in the workforce, learning through their jobs, through their interests and other responsibilities in their lives. And there is a good portion of that learning that could be equivalent to college level learning with the appropriate assessment and recognition. People who could come back to college and earn a degree, and people who we can think of as prospective students for CUNY and for colleges all across the United States. And 82% of higher education institutions in the US and Canada do in fact offer one or more pathway to earn credit for prior learning. So although CPL is quite new at many CUNY colleges, it actually, as you've seen in these last few slides, has a really deep history in United States higher education. And there's also a huge opportunity for bringing more people to higher education, especially as the traditional college-going students, the high school pipeline begins to decline. I had mentioned before that CALE back in 2020 had issued what's called the PLA Boost Report, and this study really revealed some of the ways that credit for prior learning is benefiting students all across the country. So this was based on a national survey of, I believe, 400 institutions across the country. And what was made clear through this report is that CPL increases rates of completion and persistence. and it also saves students time and money. So students who earn credit for prior learning are more likely to complete their degree by more than 17% over students who do not earn credit for prior learning. Students who earn credit for prior learning also take more courses because they're more likely to stay in college. It saves students thousands of dollars, and it can save them months or even over a year on their path to earning a degree, depending on the CPL credits that they earn and the way that those apply to their degree programs. The CALE Boost report also showed that only 1 out of 10 students at the institutions that were represented in the study actually used credit for prior learning, which is a pretty small number, and we'll talk more about the relevance of that in a moment. So the other thing that became clear from the PLA Boost report is that although all student groups showed improved outcomes related to persistence and degree completion with the use of CPL, the boost for completion rates were even more significant among underrepresented populations of students. And as you can see here, these are students who, and we'll talk more about this in a moment, that we know are big populations of CUNY students all across our university. To come back to that 1 out of 10 students point also, so there's really, 1 out of 10 is really low participation rates, especially for something that can have such a good impact on persistence and completion. And the CALE Boost report also showed that among women Pell Grant recipients, Black students, and students at community and technical colleges, these participation rates were even lower. And I think that, CALE really sums it up pretty well right here, that the findings suggest that Hispanic, Black, and low-income adult students and adults with relatively less recent college preparation could benefit even more. However, credit for prior learning cannot be a tool for improving equity unless or until measures are carefully put in place to ensure that all students have the same access, which would likely require special attention to messaging, outreach, advising, and supports. And this is a major reason why we are bringing faculty to today's session and hoping to engage, because when we're thinking about messaging, outreach, advising, and supports, faculty are really key to that. The faculty are key to establishing the credit for prior learning opportunities within their discipline, and also making sure that students are aware of these opportunities and have access to them. More to come on all of that as well. And I think, as I mentioned before, I think this is particularly relevant when we're thinking about the scale of opportunity that exists at CUNY. We know that compared with from the graphic on the right here, what this represents is you can see that the outer ring represents the populations of students that were represented in CALE's national survey, but the inner ring shows that that at CUNY these populations are even more significantly represented at our colleges, which really indicates that if CUNY can bring CPL opportunities to more of its campuses and more of its students, then the opportunity for this impact on their success and our ability to provide an equity lever within higher education is even more pronounced. CUNY is a really important place for credit for prior learning in that way. I'm going to pause again for a moment here and just see if there's any other immediate questions. Okay. Anybody want to chime in with any thoughts? Or, oh, here we go. No. Okay, so we have someone in an early childhood teacher education program, curious to know about prior experiences can be used to account for clinical experiences. Do you know of any literature that shows how other programs or schools have been honoring does not have to be early childhood specific. I would be happy to talk in more detail about teacher education programs. I know that there is, and particularly in early childhood education, we're actually planning to focus on that area in the spring semester. My office has been working with particular disciplines to try and look at some of the key credentials in particular disciplines to try and bring faculty together from multiple campuses to to really evaluate certain learning experiences and attempt to come up with recommendations for CUNY-wide consideration. And early childhood education is an area that we're planning to explore in more detail. And I may not have particular literature in this moment to share on that topic, but it's something that we're planning to dive into much more deeply here. So great. Lacey, great that you're here today, and would love to talk more offline and bring more information to light for you and your department soon. Great, thank you so much for the question and the interest. Okay, so now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about CUNY's specific policy. This policy, as I mentioned, has been on the books at CUNY for about 4.5 years now, and colleges are at different stages of implementation. And here I'm going to go through some of the specific components of the policy that I think are important to understand. The information that's on the left of the screen right now, this is the direct policy language, which we all know can be a little jargony and in the weeds. So on the right, I have attempted to boil it down to the information that I really hope folks take away today as a clearer understanding of what the policy means. The first point is that faculty determine alignment and decide the appropriate equivalencies and credit awards. This means that faculty are really the ones who are determining on behalf of their department what students can earn credit for in their discipline and among their course offerings. That work of doing close review and evaluation of particular learning experiences and just determining how that learning aligns with the courses that are offered in your own curriculum relies heavily on faculty, and we'll get into that in more detail. But I think that that's an important piece of the policy to just know and understand. It is really up to the faculty. Also important to know that CPL credit can be awarded for courses in the major. It can also fulfill general education requirements. It can also fulfill departmental electives. The policy does specify that general elective credit should be a last resort. We should really try wherever possible to award credit that actually contributes to students' progress towards degree completion and fulfills the requirements for courses that they need. That isn't always possible. General education credits can be used, but it really should be after other opportunities and angles are considered, especially where there is clear alignment with major courses or gen ed requirements. The third point here, when students transfer between CUNY colleges, CPL credits are not subject to reevaluation by the receiving college. This means that when a student enters one CUNY college and that college awards credit for prior learning, those credits transfer as though the student took the course for which they received those CPL credits at the original college. And then the fourth point, that CPL credits do not fulfill residency requirements. Okay, and I see we have a question in the comment from Gail. Is there any standard alignment among CUNY? Otherwise, one school may assign CPL for prior learning and another school may not. That is true. That is how the policy is structured. The determination of CPL credit is made at the academic department level at each college. So it is true that one college may award credit for learning experience. Another college may not have evaluated that experience or may have decided not to award credit for it. But students at the college that are receiving the credit, they are eligible to receive that credit there, and it will transfer as the same as if they took the course that they received the credit for, if they transfer between CUNY colleges. Transfer from outside of CUNY. We can talk a little bit more about how transfer from, so is your question about when students receive credit for prior learning at a non-CUNY institution and then transfer? If that is the nature of your question, that I think I would say that depending on the college or university outside of CUNY, we may or may not know from a student's transcript whether or not that credit was originally awarded as credit for prior learning. So if students are coming in from outside CUNY, their transcript would be evaluated and credits would be applied in the same manner as though they were coming with any other credits based on what a transfer credit evaluator is able to see on their transcript. Okay. few other core elements of CUNY's policy. The policy is really intended to recognize college level learning, as we had already talked about. Not everything rises to the level of college level learning, but the intention is that we are using nationally normed standards and methodologies for determining what is college level learning, and how we can assess that in such a way and come up with equivalencies that can provide equal treatment and application toward degrees, meaning that if one student is coming into CUNY with a particular learning experience and that is evaluated by CUNY faculty based on these nationally normed standards and methodologies determined to be college level learning with an equivalent course, then another student who comes in with that learning experience should also have the opportunity to earn that credit. The methods for earning CPL credit that are defined in CUNY's policy include standardized exams, non-collegiate coursework, portfolio assessment, and challenge exams. And these four methods are pretty directly aligned with the national terminology that I had shared earlier in the session. But here I've just gone into a little bit more detail about the types of learning experiences that we're talking about and how those are assessed. So I'll give folks a moment to look at this, and then I'm going to walk through each of the four in a little bit more detail. Okay, so for standardized exams, the policy names 6 exam programs. Probably AP is very familiar to most folks. CLEP might be very familiar. For each of these 6 exam programs, CUNY's policy establishes qualifying scores. Any student who presents a qualifying score on any exam included in one of these programs is eligible for CPL credit at any CUNY college. What that score means, how that actually translates to a particular course and credit award, that's determined by the faculty at the academic department level. Non-collegiate learning. So in this case, we're talking about different kinds of industry credentials, professional licenses, workplace trainings, military trainings. We include continuing ed in that realm of non-collegiate learning, and other forms of organized non-credit learning, where there is a particular, there's a curriculum that's followed, there are assessments in place, there are ways that that we know and are aware that a student has completed a particular learning experience, and the evaluation of that learning experience is another way that students can earn credit at CUNY colleges. In this case, unlike the standardized exams, which are mandated for all colleges, colleges get to decide at the academic department level which non-collegiate learning experiences they are likely to evaluate and determine credit for. We kind of can think of these in 2 buckets. One are pre-evaluated. So CUNY's policy specifically points to the American Council on Education's National Guide and also the National College Credit Recommendation Service, or NCCRS. So these are 2 nationally recognized credit recommendation providers that organize faculty evaluation by faculty from across the country. The recommendations that these faculty evaluators come up with are published in these databases, which are searchable for anybody to find what those recommendations are. When a particular training or certification, industry credential, et cetera, has been evaluated by one of these organizations, the recommendation that you can find in their database can be a great jumping off point for CUNY faculty to think about what type of course, the level of course, the types of learning outcomes that are associated with the learning experience. Those can all contribute to the way that CUNY faculty decide whether or not to award credit and what that credit award could be. And then there are non-pre-evaluated learning experiences. So these, there's many different types of learning experiences that may not have been evaluated by these national organizations, but still are potentially relevant college level learning that could align with college curriculum. For For these types of learning experiences, CUNY points faculty to what's called the professional learning evaluation process, which is based on a set of nationally recognized standards and a process form that really helps faculty walk through what information about the learning outcomes and learning experience are likely to align with the learning outcomes of a particular course. So it really walks through that process of crosswalking learning outcomes to determine if the alignment is there with a particular course and whether to award credit for that course. As I'd mentioned before, we have an online self-paced course in Blackboard that goes into greater detail about how to use both of these types of processes for understanding different learning and how they can also be used together. I also want everyone to know that that this is what my office is here for. You know, I'm really here to help colleges understand and develop their own processes for evaluating non-collegiate learning and figuring out the appropriate alignment with courses that are offered. So if this sounds interesting, but you want some more guidance and instruction, I would be very happy to both connect you with your local credit for prior learning lead at your campus. If that's not somebody who's known to you already, I can make that connection. And also, I would always be happy to talk about different instances of learning that you would like to explore and what the appropriate approach might be, whether they've been pre-evaluated or not. And then the other thing that that is on this slide here, and that is an important piece that sort of spans both pre-evaluated and non-pre-evaluated, are learning experiences that have been evaluated and equivalencies have been determined by other CUNY colleges. And we have a really great resource for understanding other CUNY colleges' equivalencies, which is Transfer Explorer. I hope that many of you are familiar with Transfer Explorer. If not, I would highly recommend checking it out. It is a really incredible resource. It was initially developed as a way of understanding how CUNY courses transfer from one CUNY college to another. But there is also a search function that's right on the landing page, which you can see on the left-hand side here. And this is a search function that allows you to search non-CUNY courses, including trainings and exams. And the example that's on the left here, this is for the CompTIA A+, which is a tech industry certification. And as you can see here, BMCC has evaluated this certification and they have determined that the course that students can receive credit for is CIS 165. You can see the course description here. You can also see that based on the information that's in Transfer Explorer, which pulls from CUNY First data, Lehman College at this time has not evaluated this particular experience and doesn't have an existing credit recommendation. So this is a way that there's sort of two ways to think about the use case for Transfer Explorer with regard to credit for prior learning. One is that you can see, or prospective students can see, external organizations that provide different kinds of trainings can see which CUNY colleges are awarding credit for which types of certifications, trainings, and exams. And then it can, so that's one way to see. And then the other way is you can see how current how CUNY colleges are currently awarding credit for non-collegiate learning or exams, and how those courses that they're awarding credit for are already transferring to your institution. That can be a great piece of information to consider alongside an ACE credit recommendation, alongside your professional learning evaluation process, to start to understand ways that that the learning outcomes of a particular certification or training align with CUNY curriculum and how that CUNY curriculum aligns with your existing course offerings. So this is a great resource and one that you know, I'll also mention that that as a database of CPL equivalencies, TREX is still growing. Colleges are all working on configuring CPL equivalencies where they have them. So over time, we expect this to become a very robust resource for students who are considering CUNY colleges to understand which colleges they can go to receive credit for different learning experiences. But I wanted to just take a moment because I think that sometimes all of this information that I'm going through, it still boils down to like, how does this work? Like, what is the process that we're talking about here? And I think that the comparison to transfer can be a really important way of understanding what it is that we're talking about here. The same as with transfer, credit for prior learning requires faculty determination of the course equivalencies, and they do so by really looking at the course learning outcomes. So with transfer, a student's transfer transcript comes in from their previous institution, and it's evaluated for alignment between the receiving college's course offerings and those that are represented on the student's transcript. Faculty are asked to review course descriptions. Maybe they'll see syllabi or learning outcomes for courses that are transferring in to determine how those match up to the courses that are required within their department and offered by their department. Faculty approval of those of the alignment and that credit equivalency, that initiates the award of the credit. It could be award as a major course, it could be fulfill a pathways requirement, or it could be elective credit. In any case, those transfer rules are written into CUNY first to codify the equivalency so that future students who are coming in with the same course from that college have the same opportunity to earn that credit. And that really is a pretty basic overview of what we're talking about with transfer. So with credit for prior learning, it really follows a very similar trajectory. A non-credit learning experience is evaluated to see the alignment between that learning and the courses and the learning associated with the college's own course offerings. So again, faculty will be asked to review information about the learning, such as program descriptions, curriculum materials, especially learning outcomes, to look at those and really think about how those all match up against a particular course that's offered within the academic department. When faculty approve the alignment between a given learning experience and a particular course, the next step is for that credit equivalency to be configured into CUNY first, so that future students who are coming in with the same learning experience have the opportunity to get the same credit. So I will pause for a moment to see if there are any questions. Is there a cost to the students? There is not a cost to the students associated with credit for prior learning, other than where a student has if they need to pay to take, for example, like a CLEP exam, the cost associated with that is the students, but there is not a cost associated with it for CUNY. Now, I'm going to very quickly just touch on the other two mechanisms that are named in the policy. Portfolio assessment, and again, I'm going to back up to remind you of the four. There's standardized exams, which are mandated for all colleges to award credit for qualifying scores. There's non-collegiate learning, which refers to different kinds of certifications, credentials, trainings, military experience, which colleges may award credit for based on faculty evaluation and determination of alignment with course offerings. Then there's portfolio assessment. Colleges may opt to evaluate prior learning through a portfolio assessment process that's managed either by an academic department or a program or an office at the institution. And colleges can also develop other forms of individualized assessment, such as a skills demonstration or an interview, depending on the nature of the academic program. Portfolio assessment might make a lot of sense. There are not very many colleges at CUNY right now that are offering like a formal approach to portfolio assessment, but I know this is an area with there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of potential here. And we really hope to see this expand in the year ahead and beyond. Challenge exams are the other type of credit for prior learning that are specifically noted in the policy. And this is where an academic department may opt to develop a challenge exam, or perhaps called the departmental exam, that would allow students to sit for an exam that's developed by the department and successfully passing the exam would mean that the student would be eligible for the credit for that course. So that can be a good option when there isn't necessarily a particular certification that aligns directly with the course, but this would provide a mechanism for students to demonstrate that they have, in fact, maybe they have a certification that fits within the curriculum in a particular course, but there's additional learning outcomes in the course. Sitting for an exam like this would be an opportunity for that person to not need to repeat big parts of that particular course. They would be able to get credit for the whole course by showing that they have, in fact, mastered the learning outcomes associated with the overall course. Again, I'm Alyssa Vine, the University Director of Credit for Prior Learning in the Office of Academic Affairs. We will be having more credit for prior learning professional development sessions coming up. Would love to see return attendees. The topics will be all different. We will go into more detail on different aspects of CPL. Also, I will make sure when the slide deck is circulated, we have CUNY's online self-paced course in Blackboard, which can be a really great resource for diving more deeply into all aspects of credit for prior learning. It is complex, and it is a little different than work that many people have done before here at CUNY, and we really want to support and help faculty across the university gain clearer understanding and help make these opportunities available for students. Okay, Monica asks, is there a report that we could run to identify new students at our college who are coming in for prior learning where our college has yet to grant credit? That's a great question, Monica. I think that is, I think that there are some CUNY colleges that are using different kinds of intake forms to try and gather information from students on their way in about learning that they may have acquired through other channels. And I would be, more than happy to share more about what I know that other colleges are doing. I think that would be a great practice for more CUNY colleges to adopt, to try and make that at the point of, any type of registration for courses, making sure you're aware of what students have already learned at the point of admissions, helping gather that information. So there's a lot that can be explored there. Oh, good question about current students that are currently enrolled that may be eligible for CPL. Yes, it is called credit for prior learning, but it does not have to be prior learning. We totally recognize that students may be in jobs or other roles that are concurrent to while they're in college, and they absolutely should be eligible for the same opportunities as students who are just coming into the university. Yes. Thank you all so much for coming. Please feel free to reach out anytime. I'm really excited to see a good turnout today and look forward to working with many of you in the future.